Hello everyone, Zach Wilson, Hood County Chess Club here, continuing the series on attacking the king. And today I'm really excited. We get to talk about my favorite attacking technique called the Greek gift, or Greco's sacrifice, first published in about 1620 by Grandmaster Greco. And his earliest writings in the 1600s still influence master chess players today. And this video, I just want to start off by saying it's just an introduction to the idea of the Greek gift. There's no possible way that I could make a short video and cover every detail and every possibility that the Greek gift has to offer, which is what makes it so much fun and so exciting. But hopefully you'll get to see some of the fundamental elements that you should be looking for in your games to see if you can pull it off. If you want to research it further, I do highly recommend one of my favorite books. This is called Sacking the Citadel by Jon Edwards, and it's only 400 pages long. It's quite an easy read, though, with a lot of game examples and a lot of ideas. And I go through that book once a year just to brush up on the ideas. So let's look at the beginning fundamentals of an important checkmate maneuver. And here we have White's queen wants to give checkmate on the h7 square protected by her knight. We also notice that the knight and the queen both attack f7, and this is very important in the maneuver. So it's Black's turn to move, and he's got to create a runaway square. If it were White's turn to move, White's queen would simply say checkmate at h7. So the only thing Black can really do here is move his rook to give a runaway square for his knight or his king to try and get away. All right, so many beginners would just rush in here and say check because it's fun to say check. But remember, when you're looking at making an attack, you want to look at every possible check and every possible capture. And what we can notice here is that we also have the opportunity, now that the rook is moved, to say check and capture this pawn on f7. So by doing that, the king only has one available square to move to, h8, and the queen can come back and now say check, forcing the king to dance back and forth. Now we move into h7. You'll see in a moment why it was important that we removed this pawn first. The king runs to his only runaway square. Now we can say check. The king again runs away. And now you can see it. With this capture and check, we're able to deliver checkmate because this f7 pawn is not blocking our access. You'll notice a few key features here. We need this pawn on e5 covering these two squares, and that's going to be a very popular theme as we go forward. The other thing I want to point out at the beginning of this exercise is that the queen's starting square in the game is d1, and the knight's starting square in the game is g1. And so what you can notice is the knight's first move in the game naturally goes to f3. He's only one jump away from getting to this key square on knight to g5. Also, the queen is only one move away to h5 to posing her threat. So it can happen quite quickly and quite easily. The real trick, oftentimes, is getting this pawn here to control this square, getting rid of the defensive knight, and controlling this square that's a runaway square for the king. When you see it go through its motions, you can see that the king would really like to run away here, but the pawn takes care of it. So moving along into the fundamentals here, we can kind of see the starting positions. Our bishop on f1 develops to d3. Our bishop on c1 stays right where it is. The queen is one move away. And our knight, which has already made its developing move, is again only one move away. We've already advanced our pawn, and these are the key features I want you to memorize. So now it's White's turn to move, and here is the Greek gift. They call it that because it's reminiscent of the Trojan horse. And in comes the Trojan horse. White says, here, have a bishop. Black says, gee, thanks, what a nice Trojan horse. And now we have the check from the knight. You'll notice that the knight is protected from the bishop on its starting square, so it doesn't take a lot of moves to set this up. So the queen doesn't really want to take this knight and give herself up for the knight. If she did simply capture the knight to remove this, well, then we already have a winning game. We've traded our knight for their queen, and surely we can win a game where we have that kind of material advantage. So here the king is simply going to run and hide, and that brings our queen into play, and now you can see the technique take place, and it's checkmate. It does bring up several questions, and this is why getting this book by Jon Edwards and why it's 400 pages is there's a lot of questions here. For instance, what if black didn't accept the sacrifice and simply moved the king over? Well, there's a chapter on that. What if, after accepting the sacrifice and the attack comes, what if the king doesn't run away back into the hole? What if instead he decides to march out into the open field? Well, there's a short chapter for this one, and there's a chapter for that one. And that's why this video can't possibly capture all of the effects. I will say that this one is fairly obvious, that he walks right into a developed or discovered check from this bishop, meaning that this knight has the choice of either going here for a double check and attacking the queen, or it has the option of capturing or going to e6, which again discovers this check and attacks the queen and the rook. And so that's really just a very bad decision for black. So black's most common move is to go here, and you're going to see in other examples that now white has several opportunities depending on what else is going on in the game. We've got the d3 check. We've got queen to g4, establishing the pin, and another discovered check that allows this knight to move and attack again. So you can see there's a lot of opportunities. What if there was a rook here and a pawn marching up the board, opening up the H file? So let's take a look at another idea. We can see here now that it looks very similar. The Greek gift happens. In comes the knight because, well, there's nothing here preventing it. Normally you want either a queen or a bishop, or both, to attack and defend this key square to stop the Greek gift from coming. King can run and hide. And now, notice this bishop maneuver. It's covering the runaway square from the king. Guess what? There's a chapter for that. You can see there's a lot of possibilities, and that's what makes the Greek gift, or sacrificing your light squared bishop on h7, so exciting. Now, a lot of times it doesn't lead to checkmate, and this frustrates a lot of beginners. Well, keep in mind that an immediate checkmate is fun, but you can still win the game if you can get a decisive material advantage. In the early example, we saw that if the queen were to sacrifice itself for the knight to stop the immediate checkmate, well, that's still a trade of knight for queen, and surely you can continue the game to a win from there. So here we just have a traditional queen's pawn opening game, and we're not too worried about the opening theory. You can kind of look at the basic moves and see what's going on here. Very traditional moves. We just noticed here that we're trying to stop the castling. Okay. Very nice. Repositioning our bishop to have it available. Okay. And now the knight on f6 has been moved, moving our pawn into its position. Now, notice the maneuver of that knight. It was simply to block the bishop on a3 so that black could castle. Unfortunately for black, what this has done is it's vacated the knight off of f6, and it's given us this key pawn. So let's look at it. We have our pawn on e5, our bishop on d3. Our knight has access to the g5 square because this knight is blocking the defender. And of course, the queen can get to h5. So in comes the Greek gift, the knight to g5 attack. And here we're going to see black try his best opportunity. I think we all recognize already it would be a huge mistake for black to go hide, because in comes the queen, and what's black to do here? He could try to create a space, but then we have our favorite maneuver. And as you can see, that knight would love to be able to block this checkmate, but he's pinned. So this is why this bishop either wants to patrol here or, based on what black is doing, reposition to a3. So there's an entire chapter on what they call bishop to a3. Okay, so let's back this up for just a brief moment. And the king gives a better try here, stepping out into the open field. And we've got a lot of opportunities here. We could cause a check with queen to d3 and continue maneuvering from there. We could simply put our queen on g4, threatening a discovered attack when this knight leaps into a dangerous fork. Let's see what happened in this example game here. The queen simply renewed the threat, tried to attack the queen, keeps the threat alive, attacks the queen, keeps the threat alive. So now black moves the queen to try and get away from this deadly attack from the discovered check. The knight moves there anyway. There's our discovery. King tries to run away. And now look at this. We have an incredible fork here, and this is where the example stops. The point is that it didn't lead to checkmate immediately, but look at the threats. The king's castled position has been ruined. The king is on the run, and we have this deadly fork. So the Greek gift isn't always about getting checkmate. Here's an example from one of my own personal games from a long time ago. This was a blitz game. I'm sure if you put it into a computer, you could find all kinds of mistakes between two amateurs. But one of the things I wanted to show you was I enjoy starting with my queen's pawn opening. And the reason for that is it doesn't take very long in a queen's gambit declined, queen's gambit accepted, the Tarrasch defense, the Slav defense, the semi-Slav defense, all of these being responses to the queen's pawn opening, that the natural position of the light squared bishop is on d3, attacking h7. So I get a lot of chances to play the Greek gift in my blitz games because people are moving quickly and not thinking about it coming. I'm always looking for the opportunity. And so one of the things we have to remember is that this pawn wants to march and get here to eject this knight. We need this knight to move because he's currently protecting h7, which denies our ability to do the Greek gift. So after a few more moves, you can see that I have positioned the knight, the rook, the bishop, all in support of marching this pawn. So in comes the pawn push. You can see I'm threatening a pawn fork here. So they have to respond. They take, I take with the knight. Now I've got another fork. And usually they're concerned more about their bishops. Everybody loves their bishop pairs and they protect it at all costs. What they don't realize is that I want this knight gone. And they give it to me for free. I'm a very, very happy person because now there is no defensive knight here. And I'm staring at h7. So they're trying to attack on the queen side. They obviously don't see the Greek gift coming. And my knight is protected by the bishop, so the queen can't take it unless they want to give up the queen for a knight trade. So he went and hid in the corner. And what I wanted to show you about this game in this same maneuver here with the crisscross of the queen and causing the checkmate was, I don't have the pawn here. But one of the reasons of the pawn being here is that it defends the runaway square. But there is no runaway square here because black's bishop is in the way. So this was just another example of how the Greek gift can work. A couple of fundamental ideas. What if the king is not castled yet and the rook is still on the h-file? You can march your h-pawn up, defending this square. So if black does have a bishop on e7 with their queen trying to attack through here, we have an extra opportunity here. And what's exciting about this is now if, let's look at this first, if they try to take the knight, you can take back with the pawn and look at this amazing rook. And in comes the queen, and what's black to do here? He can try to create a space, but then we get a nail. Remember, this pawn is called a nail. Hopefully you heard that from some of the previous Attacking the King videos. And then there's checkmate. He can't get out of it. Okay, so let's look at that again. What are some of the other options? He could step out into the position And there's just so many things that can happen here. Queen to d3, for instance. And if he steps over to the side, look at this. The queen can enter the position from the reverse and force the king down the board, and this is going to lead to a checkmate. Okay? What if we move in here and he tries to block? Well, then look at this. We've got that beautiful fork. There's just so many things that can go wrong here for white. What if, for instance, let's take a look here. What if he denied the sacrifice and said, you know what, I don't want the bishop. Okay, we'll defend the bishop. He gives himself a place for the king to run to. Okay, lots of ideas here. Pushing that h-pawn. Giving up the knight, but now opening up the position. There's just so many ideas here that, golly, the attack is great. So that's some ideas from when you have an uncastled king. Other examples, and I really like this one. It's a totally different attack. Yes, there's our sacrifice. Yes, here it comes, and he comes out to the center of the board because he's already learned that hiding in the corner just doesn't seem to do any good. And watch this. Here's our queen to d3 check. They try to block it with the pawn to f5. Now, most of us would think immediately, you've given me this fork. Why wouldn't I take it? At a minimum, I'm going to get my sacrifice back and continue the game with your king's safety completely destroyed. But what about en passant? Checkmate. So I wanted to show you that with a castled king, that putting your rook out on the e file can be just as deadly. Our knight is defended by the bishop. Okay? The knight is defending key squares around the king. Okay? The queen, operating like a bishop, is taking away squares. And so the rook is able to come in defended by the knight, patrolling here. So you can look at it. Rook, knight, his own piece, covered by the knight, rook, rook, covered by the bishop, covered by the queen, covered by the rook and the pawn. Just ugly. So I really like this one because of the way that the rook comes in and delivers the checkmate. Well, this was just an introduction to the idea of the Greek gift. And it all stems from attacking here on h7. If we look at the Greek gift fundamentals one more time, you can see that we have our light squared bishop wanting to sacrifice itself on h7. We have a knight that can quickly jump into g5. We have a queen that's ready to come into h5. We have support from our c1 bishop, and that is the basis of the Greek gift. I do want to encourage you to check out this book, pardon me, to check out this book, Sacking the Citadel by Jon Edwards. It's an incredible book all about the classic bishop sacrifice or Greek gift on h7. Practice these ideas with a friend, and we'll see you real soon. Remember, you are what you repeat.